Welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm your host, Pete Mezzetti. My guest this evening is Eric Hammerling, who's the Executive Director of the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. Mr. Hammerling, welcome, sir. How are you, bud?
I'm doing great. Great to see you.
You too. Usually you and I see each other through Zoom.
I know. This is so strange. Like I can reach out and literally touch you.
It's strange to see you in person. How have you been?
Good.
What's
good.
new?
Busy. Oh my God. There are so many exciting things happening with forest parks and trails. We're very busy as an organization, and as the executive director, that keeps me pretty busy too.
Exactly. Now tell us a little bit about the Forest and Park Association, exactly what you guys do.
Sure. Well, the Connecticut Forest and Park Association is actually the oldest nonprofit conservation organization in Connecticut.
Okay.
We've now been 126 years focused on protecting special places in Connecticut. And part of the reason that CFPA was first established was actually, that was a time in 1895 before there were state parks or state forests.
Right.
And our original mission was to try to establish those places for the state. So I would say to many people, you're welcome, because now we've got 110 state parks in Connecticut, another 32 state forests, and almost 300,000 acres of public land for all of us to enjoy.
Absolutely.
So that's where we came from, and then of course what we're best known for today is in addition to, of course, the brilliant work that we do at the Capitol as an advocate for forest parks and trails, is being the organization responsible for 825 plus miles of blue-blazed hiking trails all around the state. And those are all maintained by volunteers of our organization.
Now what is the Blue Blaze hiking trail?
So a blue-blazed hiking trail means that there is, if you're walking on a trail and you see a tree that has a rectangular paint on it, it's a light blue color, and actually that color was discovered for the use of trails in 1929 when some tests were done. They painted a bunch of logs with different colors, and they were, I'm sure, drinking a few beverages, waiting late into the night, and they saw that the light blue blaze was the one that was easiest to see latest at night. So that became the blaze, the painted blaze on all of the now blue blazed hiking trails.
Cool. Very cool. I didn't know that.
It's amazing all the things you learn.
It is. Now, you were telling me before we started taping tonight a very interesting fact about Rocky Neck State Park.
Yeah, well, since, and actually it's just right along the lines of what we were talking about. The mission of the organization was to protect special places to become state parks and state forests. And Rocky Neck, now known as one of our premier state park beaches, didn't used to be that. In fact, it used to be an area that was seen much more as a mosquito wet wasteland. And it took some people with vision to say, this could be a place where people recreate and have access to Long Island Sound. So it was actually some board members of the Connecticut Forest and Park Association who got together when they heard that the former fish cannery that was at Rocky Neck was up for sale. They put together the money between them. It was only about $20,000. It was amazing what $20,000 could buy back then. And they put together the money to actually acquire Rocky Neck and then convince the state to take Rocky Neck on as a state park.
Really? Very cool, very cool. Now, during the pandemic, how are things going with the State Forest and Park Association?
Well, we have been as busy as ever because, as you know, over the last year and a half, so many indoor activities were closed down, but the outdoors never closed. And in fact, one of the respites that people had from all the anxiety and stress of being indoors and worrying about the pandemic was actually to get outside. So people were getting outdoors on trails in record numbers. In fact, over this last year, there were in many places, trail use was up by over 50% over previous years. In terms of visitation to state parks and forests, similarly, visitation way up over the last year. And to be able to ensure that those parks and forests and trails were, safe for people to use, took a lot of time and energy and money to make sure that that was the case. So our volunteers were heroic because, as you remember, and certainly as a volunteer yourself,
absolutely.
You know that volunteers were on the front lines, literally at times, putting themselves potentially in harm's way, being outdoors, working on trails, doing tough work after storms, like after Storm Isaias. There was a lot of damage that needed to be, opened up again. So volunteers were heroic, and we just can't say enough about what they did.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And especially being on the shoreline, we have a couple very cool state parks in the area that I tape in and I live in, and it's very, very, very cool.
Yeah, well, in fact, the most visited of all of the state parks are those on the shoreline. So, like Hammerling is the most visited state park. Over 2 million people a year come to visit Hammerling, and and if you think about some other recreation areas that are around buildings, like how many people go to Mystic Aquarium, or they actually kind of pale in comparison to all the people who are getting to parks.
Really?
And one of the neat things about parks these days too, and as you know, since 2018, there's been a program called the Passport to the Parks. And that program ensures that if you have a Connecticut license plate on your car, you no longer have to pay a fee at gates to the park to get in. If you're from outside of Connecticut, you still have to pay. But all residents get in without having to pay at the gates, and that's really opened up access to so many people that may have in the past not been able to be interested or willing to shell out it used to be $13 to get in just one time to Hammerling or any of the other shoreline parks. To get in for free has really made a huge difference. We've also found that some of the behavior of people going to parks has changed. So whereas when you used to have to pay the $13 at the gate, people would be like, I'm going to get my money's worth and stay all day long. Now that people are able to get in without having to pay at the gates, they come in, spend a couple hours, I've had fun, I can go somewhere else now. What that actually allows is more people to come into the park. The turnover is now there, and they've really documented that well. More people are able to get to parks. Even parks that close when the parking lot fills up, they allow people now to, if they park in a legal parking spot, walk into the park. So there are just many more ways to access the parks than ever before, and that's exciting. But we need to, as a state, as Connecticut, as residents who care about these special places, we have to ensure they're well cared for. So that's what the Passport to the Parks program helps to do. It generates money to help with the operations and maintenance of parks and keeps it safe and open for all of us.
Now, as far as what we're going through during the pandemic, how's the Passports to the Park program working out so far?
It's actually worked out amazingly well because people have continued even during the pandemic to register their vehicles, and the way that the Passport to the Parks is paid for is when any of us register our car at the Department of Motor Vehicles, we pay an extra $5 a year, which basically is, for $5 a year, that is your passport
Right.
to parks all year long.
Exactly.
Right? So there's no fee at the gate. You've already paid your $5.
Right.
But that $5 paid by a lot of people in Connecticut adds up and actually generates about $16 million a year.
Oh, wow.
Which is the fundamental funding
Right.
to ensure that the parks are well maintained.
Absolutely, absolutely. And from what I understand and what I remember, you guys back a little while ago did Trails Day.
Yeah, well,
was it?
every year the first weekend in June
Right.
is Connecticut Trails Day, and as you know, every year Connecticut actually leads the nation in
Right.
the number of Trails Day events that happen here. Last year, during the pandemic, was a little bit of a strange year for all of us.
Yeah.
Trails Day last year was a DIY, a do-it-yourself
Right.
event.
Right.
We said, here are some cool places to go. Go do it. Don't go in a big group. Do it safely.
Exactly.
Be outdoors. This year, we were able to actually have events led by leaders once again. Over 180 events happened that first weekend in June this year.
Really?
So all around the state, 180 plus events, well attended. People, I think it was a beautiful, warm weekend.
It was.
People got outdoors, and it was, it was outstanding, and it felt so good. Just like we're
absolutely.
here today in person.
Yeah.
I went to 3 events over the course of the weekend. Usually I go to 4, sometimes 5. But at every event, people were just appreciative to be in a group,
Right.
seeing each other in person, and being outdoors in beautiful places with people who care about those places and who make them kind of fun and exciting and accessible. It was marvelous. I can't say enough about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's always the first weekend of June, correct?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep. So it's June 5th and 6th this year. Next year we're again looking forward to hopefully having a great weekend.
Yeah, and last time you and I were together for right before the pandemic, you guys were celebrating your 125th anniversary.
That's right. I know. It seems like yesterday.
So you owe me a party.
I know. I know. Well, we really, that was one of the, obviously there were so many regrets that we
Right.
all have during the
Absolutely.
pandemic, the things we missed out on.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that we missed out on was, the opportunity to celebrate 125 years of some really extraordinary things. I'm so fortunate. I've been at CFPA since May of 2008.
Okay.
But some of my predecessors did incredible things, and volunteers did incredible things. So, it's just an honor to be associated with the organization.
Speaking of organizations and wonderful people, you and I have to do a quick shout out to the DEEP commissioner.
Yes, Commissioner Dykes
Absolutely.
has been, I'd say, very few commissioners before her have been so involved
Yeah.
with getting outdoors with their families. She has some great kids, wonderful husband, and have brought them outdoors to many events in state parks and forests, and have really been leaders,
Right.
modeling what you're supposed to do as the head of DEEP. So
Right.
happy to give a shout out.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
Commissioner
She
Dykes.
was here. She was on with me not long ago through Zoom. That was actually a fun interview. First time I've ever met her. I really like her a lot.
Yeah, she's such a smart person, and obviously she's trying to do things on many different fronts.
Right.
But climate change being something that underlines a lot of what we all have to be thinking about. So
Right.
thinking about parks and forests in the context of climate change, thinking about energy use and responsible use in the context of climate change. Boy, what a challenge that is.
Absolutely.
But we're thankful for her leadership.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of leadership, how closely do you guys work with the legislature?
This year we weren't able to get very close to the legislature
Right, because
because
everything
they
was
were
done.
closed and everything was done remotely. And I've got to say, I really was not a fan of, though of course understood what had to be done.
Right.
In a normal year, we would, we typically attend 10 plus public hearings every year we have a lobbyist who is at the State House, 24/7, ensuring that we are connected to important policies for forest parks and trails. So we definitely prefer that than what we had to do this year.
Absolutely. And how did you guys think the legislative session went this year?
Despite some of the frustrations with not being in the building, actually, I'd say a number of legislators really spoke up and supported strongly state parks. So we were happy to see that.
Sure.
The Passport to the Parks program survived another legislative session intact.
Okay.
There were some proposals, to try to undermine it in some ways, because if there's any sort of funding, it's always potentially a victim to those types of efforts. But in the state budget, for 2022, 2023, the Passport to the Parks actually got a little increase in funding of $1.5 million.
All right.
Something that we were actively advocating for, and I think there's an understanding that there is a huge interest in being outdoors in the parks and forests, so we need to make sure they're well maintained, and the Passport is critical to that. But there is one thing that the legislative session didn't really act on, and that is going to need to be addressed as part of making sure that our parks are well tended to.
Yeah.
And it's something that we hope the Lamont administration will be taking action on this.
Right.
Right now, state parks are not mostly maintained by full-time staff. It's actually mostly seasonal workers who just between April and October are focused on doing maintenance and helping to keep these places safe and open.
Oh, sure.
But the rate that seasonal workers are being paid has been basically capped at $14 an hour for several years. So what used to be a fairly generous rate of support and is now not competing with pharmacies and shopping malls and all sorts of other jobs that teenagers and young adults can get.
Right.
So it's become more and more difficult to attract young people to work in the parks.
Absolutely.
And that makes it harder to also retain people from one year to the next. Those are the most valuable seasonal workers, not just those who come out once, but those who come back the next year and the next year, and who really know a place and can get things done. Their hourly rates have been capped at that $14 an hour. And I think they're really having a tough time finding people to maintain state parks. They also have for lifeguards at state parks who, when you need a lifeguard, that's a pretty important safety element at the shoreline parks. Well, they haven't been able to pay competitive hourly rates too for lifeguards.
Right.
So municipal park and rec departments and all sorts of others are getting lifeguards before our state parks are getting lifeguards.
Right.
I'm just increasingly concerned that we're not keeping up as a state, and we need to address that. So that didn't happen in the legislative session. Hopefully that's something that the governor will help to rectify, and it's really critical that he does, so that next year we're not facing the issue of seasonal workers deciding to take other jobs. We need them to come back.
Now, how do you think the governor should rectify that situation?
I think he needs to ensure that they're being paid an hourly rate that is competitive.
Right.
So, whether that's $15 or $16 an hour. Fortunately, thanks to the Passport to the Parks, the funding is there to be able to do it. It's more a matter of changing the state pay structure.
Okay.
Which can be done. In fact, it's critical to do it this year and through next year for this reason as well. You may know next July 1st, the state employee contract with the state changes.
It does.
And it changes in a way that is encouraging people to retire before July 1st of next year. So a lot of people are going to retire.
Right.
So if you have a lot of people retiring, it's going to take time to replace them, and you're not getting seasonal workers to want to come back at a competitive rate. That's like compounding a problem that will make next year even harder to operate the parks safely. So we want to see the governor take care of this right away.
Absolutely, absolutely. I did not know that there were that many people that are going to retire before July 1st of next year.
Yeah, in fact, there was a study that was commissioned by the governor because they've kind of seen this coming for about 5 years.
Okay.
This cliff of retirements that's coming July 1st next year. And so in the study, they actually identified how many people within the state park and forest and wildlife management area management system are eligible for retirement, and it's a startlingly high figure. About 45% of those people who right now are taking care of parks and forests and wildlife management areas and fisheries are eligible to retire before July 1st next year. Many of those employees are going to take advantage of that. And again, that's why we have to be refilling those positions and ensuring that we have seasonals to support.
And I'm sure that if people who are filling those positions have to be certified.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, the state does some strange things in how it rehires people.
Okay.
So you are really for most situations, you're not able to advertise a refill of a position until someone has already retired.
Really?
So what that means is, obviously, all of the knowledge that someone takes out the door with them when they retire doesn't get passed on as easily as it might if there was a little bit of overlap between people retiring and new people coming in. Anyway, some of this is maybe a little bit in the weeds, but it's really important in thinking about if we want parks to be well tended to, we need to have professionals who are trained, ready, able, and experienced to be able to do it.
So there's no cross-training between old employee retiring and new employee coming in?
Not directly. There are, of course, there are some people who will be sticking around beyond July 1st, and they'll have a big responsibility of training a whole legion of new people. And I'm sure there will be some fantastic new people who come on board and all that, but it's going to be a pretty disruptive event come July 1st next year. So the hope is that things like the seasonal rates will get put in place so that maybe that will be something we can cross off the list and not worry about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now as far as the Forest and Park Association goes for the upcoming year of July 1st, which is here in a couple of days, what are you guys seeing?
Well, we always look forward to July 1st because July 4th is right around the corner.
Exactly.
And that's always the kind of high point of the state park year.
Yeah.
That's when they think about when are more people thinking about parks and getting outdoors than any other time, it's right around the July 4th weekend. So this year, I'm sure if this hot spell of weather that we have continues, a lot of people are going to be getting to the beach. It's going to be really busy. I would say to anyone who's trying to get out during that time frame, go early. Be willing to wait on a line for a little bit.
Absolutely.
But it will be worth it, because to be out there on the smoking sands, but having the water that you can take a dip in, it'll be nice and warm and beautiful.
Now, as far as the opening of park season, I believe they opened for the season Memorial Day weekend, and from what I remember, Memorial Day weekend wasn't that sunny, wasn't that bright.
No.
I think it rained all weekend, and you had to feel bad for the people that were camping at Hammerling or camping for the weekend. It's like, Rain all weekend? No,
Yeah,
I'm good.
You're right. No, that was not a very auspicious opening to the season.
No.
But it also is like, I guess I tend to be an optimist. So when things are rainy like that, you get to look up and in a better direction when you
Right.
start at the very bottom.
Right.
But really, since that weekend, most of the weekends since then have been pretty nice.
Yeah.
And so, people have been getting out to parks and campgrounds, again, at record high numbers. And it's just a wonderful thing to see. After all of the craziness of this last year, to see things starting to return to normal again is really exciting.
Absolutely. Eric, would you mind sticking around for another segment?
I'd be happy to.
All right, we'll be right back.
Myth. If you get COVID-19, you'll recover after a few days. That myth is false. We're only just beginning to understand the effects of COVID-19 on the human body, as we're starting to see more and more people identifying as long haulers who are having symptoms for weeks, if not months after their initial infection. Continue to wear a mask, socially distance, and wash your hands. Together, we can keep COVID out of school.
For ways to keep your community safe, go to backtoschooltogether.com.
Hey Bobo, do trees tell each other stories?
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, why don't we go find out? Listen.
Do clouds take naps?
I couldn't tell you.
Dad, do stars visit their friends?
Look!
Welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti, sitting here with Eric Hammerling from the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. My friend, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to open up this segment talking about trails.
All right, let's do it.
Where do you want to start?
Well, I can tell you that there are a lot of miles of trail that will need tending to this year. Despite our best efforts, there will be storms. There will be trees that fall. There will be bridges that need tending to make sure they stay safe. And I just want to once again, give huge thanks to. Now we're fortunate we have 3 staff at CFPA who are focused on nothing but trails. We have some Claire, who you've met, who has oversight over the entire trail system and all the partnerships that we have with various organizations and individuals and the state and towns who help to maintain and keep trails open. We have Alex Bradley, who is working with crews. Right now he has a summer trail crew of 5 who are working with him out in the field. And he also works with different groups that are interested in having kind of special work parties to protect trails. And Jeb Stevens is our newest trails staff person, and he's doing a kind of a new thing, which we've known has been an issue for a long time, but we just haven't been able to invest in it with a focused effort. And that is to try to protect trails, actually acquire land to ensure that trails stay connected. If you think about the 825 miles of Blue Blaze hiking trails that go, all around the state, 96 different towns, they go through a combination of private land, municipal land, state land, and there are always connections that get broken in that system, in particular on private land. Now we're very fortunate, almost 45% of the trails are on private land, and we have wonderful landowners who are willing to be hosts of trails who say, sure, I don't mind if there's a trail that goes through, my back lot. But there are at times a new landowner who acquires a property and they say, wait, there's a trail going through my back lot? I'm not sure I want to have that there. When that happens, we have to first of all respond directly with the landowner and hopefully say, well, here's all the good things that come from having a trail be in your back lot. Or we get to a point where we're like, well, maybe we can make an offer and help to protect that property. And here are the various things that we could do together. So Jeb is going to be responsible for having those conversations with landowners to really keep trails connected, and we'll work on that effort, which is really exciting. It's a little bit daunting because it's, almost 400 miles of trail.
Right.
It's rare that a landowner has more than, a quarter of a mile of trail on their property. So if you think about it, that's a lot of landowners, and a big long-term effort, but one that's well worth it.
Absolutely.
So we have an exciting team, and then they get to work with some of the most amazing volunteers on the planet. We have right now about 115 trail managers who are volunteers, and they have said, this is a section of trail that I want to be dedicated to help protecting. I will go out and make sure those blazes are perfect on the trees. Right. I will make sure that we're keeping vegetation off the trail so that people don't have to wade through grass. We will make sure that there is a bridge that goes over water features so that people are not going to get their feet wet as they're walking through the Blue Blazed hiking trails. So these amazing volunteers are incredibly dedicated to sections of trail, and we work with them to ensure that this section of trail and this section of trail and this section of trail leads to a great experience outdoors.
Cool.
And we make sure that, if they need tools and training and equipment and, all that, we help to put together projects throughout the year to make sure those places stay connected and open for the public. It's a big task because there are so many miles. But that's why we do what we do. We love to not only make trails available for others. We like to use trails ourselves. So I can say we get something from this too. Not only the great feeling of we have done a service for the community for making these places available, but also we get to go for a nice walk ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. Now, once the season is over, what do you guys do to make sure the upkeep of the trails still continues?
So you make an assumption, my friend, that the season is ever over. There are, and of course there are some places that, once the snow flies, people are not going to be accessing certain areas, but a lot of the trails are open year round.
Really?
And people will, in some areas, cross-country ski or snowshoe or, otherwise use the trails. So it's figuring out, what the timing is of maintaining them to ensure that they stay open for as long as possible. Every year during the winter, spring, or when there are hurricanes or things like that pop up, we need to respond. So we on our website, which is ctwoodlands.org. We have an interactive trails map, and the ability for if someone is out using the trail and they want to report a problem, they come to a tree that's down across the trail. There's a form that people can fill out. We share that information with our trails managers and ensure that those places are remedied. So it's throughout the year, making sure we take care of those special places.
What types of information can people find on your website?
So in addition to all the information about we have this interactive trails map that's become a very popular item. You can see where all of the Blue Blazed hiking trails are.
Okay.
You can get driving directions to all of the trailheads throughout the system.
Really?
And you can even find information out about how many parking spots are available in different places. Now, not live information. You can't say there's only, there are 3 spots and 2 are available. We're not that good. And we're good, but we're not that good yet. But we can at least say that this is a place that has, 25 spots. This is a place that has 3 spots, so people can plan accordingly as they go out to explore.
And I think there's even a picture of Pete Mezzetti on the website.
Yes,
I think
there is.
There should be.
There is for sure. We try to recognize our volunteers appropriately. And that's actually one of the things that we're looking forward to, Pete. Once again, every year,
Yes.
the first Friday in November is when we have our annual meeting and recognition event for volunteers.
Okay.
We got to make sure that you're there this year to be able to say thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Let me know. And now, have you guys opened your office to the public, or are you guys still closed? Last time you and I were together, you were working from home, and you were only going into the office, but you had somebody else going into the office more accurate, more than you did, just to like make sure the upkeep is okay.
Right. So we now are mostly all coming back to the office.
Okay.
Not every day. Still people are working from home somewhat to keep, well distanced, et cetera. But everyone is fully vaccinated.
Right.
And we will be opening our community room up to public use once again starting in October. In terms of our office space, we are using that right now amongst most of us, and are starting to return to normal. The only reason we're not opening our community space until October is we have a number of trails crews that over the course of the year are going to be working with us and will be using that space. So we didn't want to disrupt all of the people. So if you can imagine, very serious, focused meeting happening in the space, and all of a sudden here come 5 Trails crew members ripe from the field. We didn't want to set up those kinds of situations.
Oh, no.
Right? Shaking hands, spreading poison ivy as they go.
No.
It just was not going to work out that way. And we have actually a few, every year we'll have AmeriCorps have a crew with us. This year we're going to be working with a group out of Massachusetts called TerraCorps, who for the first year is having interns doing work in Connecticut. And so, it's going to be a very busy year.
Now, you guys also work with Mason Turnbull from DEEP.
Yeah, Mason is a friend, someone who we knew when he worked at REI before coming to DEEP, but he's been an amazing deputy commissioner at the agency. He's responsible for kind of parks and forests and fish and wildlife type outdoor recreation. And he brings a spirit and energy, and I've got to say it's kind of nice too, having come from outside of state service, to be focusing on ways to make the state be even better at doing what it does. Mason's been terrific. And he also has, and I particularly appreciate this, he has a soft spot for trails.
Oh, does he?
Because he is a trail user and knows what an important part not only of recreation and fitness, but mental health, but economic health really revolves around people getting outdoors and being active on trails. He saw from when he was at REI what a big impact on the economy comes from people who are getting ready for outdoor recreation.
Now, what is REI?
So REI is it's a business, it's a co-op. They actually are based in Seattle, but they have 3 stores in Connecticut, and they sell outdoor recreation equipment.
Okay.
So they are dedicated to the outdoors, and actually the new chief of staff at DEEP also previously worked at REI. So I'm really pleased to see how involved they are with how our state's Energy and Environmental Protection Department is run.
Who's the new chief of staff at DEEP?
Andrew Hoskins is his name. He lives in Washington, Connecticut with his family. He also loves trails, loves people getting outdoors, and wanted to, I think came to working at DEEP out of a sense of service for the state and wanting to make sure that it does its business as well as it can. So we're wishing him a lot of luck, because like I mentioned, this big issue of retirements coming up, and the issue of making sure seasonal workers are well paid, et cetera. A lot of those things as chief of staff he will be engaged in, and it's going to be a challenge, but we know he's up for the job.
Absolutely. What else are you guys up to? What else do you want to talk about? We got some time.
Well, I can say that one of the areas where I'm going to be focusing a lot of my attention over the next several months is on the health of our state's forests.
Right.
And one of the things that I did during the pandemic was I was fortunate to chair the forest subgroup, which is a part of the Governor's Council on Climate Change, which was really focused on the important role that forests play in climate. And as you are probably aware, the more carbon that is in our forests means less carbon in the atmosphere, right? So the more carbon can be in forests and soils means we're going to have less problems associated with climate change. So we want to make sure our forests are healthy. And there are a lot of challenges to keeping our forests healthy because, unfortunately, climate change itself is impacting the health of our forests. So it's like that kind of cycle too. But we're going to be working this next year to come up with, hopefully, a way for Connecticut to become a no net loss of forest state. There are 2 states in the nation right now that are no net loss of forest states. States of Maryland and New Jersey. Both of those states have found a way to really slow the loss of forest land in their states by becoming a no net loss of forest state. Similar to, you might have heard that no net loss terminology used with wetlands, right? No net loss of wetlands. Well, if we're no net loss of forest, that means that we do everything we can to avoid the loss of forests. And in certain situations where forests are lost in ways that are permitted by the state or by municipal governments, we figure out a way to compensate to have new forests for the future. So it's there's going to be a lot of work done in that area. I hope I'm explaining it in an okay way.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we are excited about the potential to protect forests in Connecticut.
Now let's talk about the no net loss of forest states, the way everything works, and maybe get in a little bit more detail.
Sure. So, so if you think about how forests are often lost, it's actually not in situations where you have forests that are managed sustainably for forest products but because in that situation there may be wood coming out of the forest, but it's being maintained as a forest. The biggest concern for us is when forests are lost. Essentially, a forest gets converted to a parking lot or a new development, and there's nothing done to help compensate for the lost carbon storage that goes away when a forest is lost.
Right.
So that is what the trick will be, is in those instances where where forested lands are converted to a parking lot or to a developed area, how can we ensure that we're protecting in other parts of Connecticut or nearby where forest land is lost, how can we make sure that other forests are protected? So on balance, we will, over time, get to a place where we're replacing the carbon storage that was lost.
Right.
And what they've done in Maryland and New Jersey is they found by being a no net loss of forest state in both instances, they have started turning the corner on some of their biggest problems with not having adequate forest in certain areas. So for example, in Connecticut, one of the areas where we see the greatest imbalance between haves and have-nots is in our urban areas. Forests in our urban areas tend to be in the wealthier, whiter neighborhoods. In neighborhoods that are less wealthy with higher percentages of people of color, that tends to be areas where there is less forest cover. That becomes a really important situation because if you think about all of the values that trees provide in cities, right? Cleaner air, less problems with asthma. You have heat that is avoided when you have more trees that are providing shade.
Sure.
Trees soak up floodwaters to reduce problems with flooding.
Right.
And if those problems are in areas that have less trees, well, we need to make sure there are more trees in the areas that right now don't have enough trees to provide those benefits. So in New Jersey and Maryland, that's one of the things that they've been able to do with their no net loss of forest policy, is to generate support to make sure that those areas that right now don't have forests have more trees that are planted and maintained and protected into the future. And that's something that I think we should all aspire for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let's talk about climate change.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is here. It's easy to say it on a hot day like today. It feels like 100 plus.
Right.
But climate change is here, and I think we all feel the urgency of trying to do something about it. Right. What our state is trying to do is to make some pretty significant changes related to climate change before 2030. The year 2030 is being looked at across the country as if we don't make some significant changes related to climate by then. Right. We're in trouble. Yeah. And not just us, but future generations are in trouble. So the more that we can do between now and 2030 to protect our forests, to protect the outdoors, keep them, I mean, obviously there are things about protecting the outdoors that have nothing to do with climate, right? These are places that we love to go for recreation, for mental health. That doesn't have to do with anything to do with climate, but there are benefits that accrue to doing a better job of sequestering climate causing gases, greenhouse gases. The more we can have protected land to soak up carbon, the better off we're going to be in the future. So there's at the national level, you've probably heard of the 30 by 30 initiative. That's one way to try to protect more land so that we have fewer problems with climate change. And we're trying to play a really productive role in that.
Now, what about, I didn't know that you guys were also instrumental with the land trust.
Oh yes, so we are actually a statewide land trust. We have about 2,000 acres of property that we're responsible for in various towns around the state. Because we've been around for 126 years, that's how some of these land holdings happened. Okay. If there were, at the time, that someone wanted to donate their forest to be protected as a forest forever, if there were a local land trust available at the time, that might have been where they gave their gift of land. But we have collected these about 20 easements, meaning land that we're responsible to protect through time, and land that we own, that we manage for public benefit. So we are a land trust, and there are actually more land trusts than almost any other state in the nation. We're actually number 3 in the country in terms of the number of land trusts that we have in Connecticut.
Really?
So California is number 1, Massachusetts is number 2,
we're number
but
3.
we're number 3.
There you go.
And it's because people care about the outdoors, care about having access to land that's going to be protected forever, and that's what we as a land trust and other land trusts do.
How many land trusts are there in the state of Connecticut?
There are actually right now about 137, I think is the latest figure.
All right.
But if you think about how amazing that is, right? We have 169 towns. Right. 137 land trusts. That means
that's pretty good.
Towns are really interested in protecting property. I wish, honestly, there were a few fewer land trusts and a few regional groups that were, it might be even more impactful at protecting land if we weren't so parochial.
Right.
But hey, in Connecticut, we are a town-by-town kind of state.
Oh, absolutely.
So you could see where that might come from.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what else are we up to in as far as CFPA goes, and where do you think we're going in the near distant future?
So this is always the time of year after the legislative session and the special session has kind of concluded that we do a little bit of analysis, and we say, so what are some things that we need to work on as initiatives going forward, and how did things go this year? You know, and of course this is just in the policy realm, but you could extend this to our education programs, to our work on trails, et cetera. But you know, this year we feel like things went pretty well in the budget. As I mentioned, you know, the passport of the parks is intact, and you know, other priorities kind of came through at decent levels. Funding for bond funding for the recreational trails and greenways program was in the budget, in the bonding bill, but we still need to have the governor release those funds. So we have some money authorized that needs to be released. And one of the things that we hoped to do this year, but weren't able to get a lot of traction on it, and we hope will become a priority this next year, is to help find a way, because I mentioned to you that about 45% of the Blue Blazed hiking trails are on private land.
Right.
We would love to find some incentives for private landowners to help them keep that land open, and even go one step further to make a commitment to long-term protection of those trails. So there are a couple different incentives that we've worked on through the legislative session that we'll continue working on. And hopefully this next year we'll be able to offer something that will help to protect trails for the long term through, for example, you know, if someone puts an easement on the trail that goes through their property, it helps with their local taxes that they're paying. It reduces their bill a little bit, because they've said, well, here's a trail through my property that I'm never going to develop, so they should pay less in taxes. Well, we would say, if they make that forever commitment to have a trail go through their property, they shouldn't have to pay taxes on that section of trail on their property forever. Let's meet the landowners where they are. If they're willing to say, forever I will do this, and put it in an easement, we should at the municipal level say, okay, and we're going to reward you by not charging taxes on that section of trail. Now, right now under the law you can't do that, and we would love to enable something like that to be a way to say thank you to landowners who are so community minded that they're willing to make that permanent commitment to keeping a trail open.
Absolutely, absolutely. You guys are a very busy organization.
We are.
Very.
We are. We're you know, we have 8 staff, but we all wear many hats, like you might imagine, as many nonprofits do, and but yeah, we're busy because people are really excited about the outdoors, want leadership and support in helping to do good things, and you know, that's what we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We got about a little bit more time left, so what else we want to mention real quick?
Well, I would just encourage people who are interested in getting involved as a volunteer to think about doing that with the Connecticut Forest and Park Association.
Absolutely.
You know, I mentioned the trail volunteers who are committed to a section of trail for a long period of time. There are often opportunities to become a trail volunteer and you know, focus on one section of trail, but even more often throughout the year, we'll have work parties where you know, a few trees were knocked down in a certain area from a storm. We would love some people to come out and help to reopen that area, or to work to build a bridge, or to do those types of things. We will have more and more public work parties advertised on our website as things continue opening up. Let's hope this all continues.
Yes, please.
But you know, and also if people are interested in volunteering with us in other ways, you know, we're always trying to be creative to find a match between someone's passion and what we do. And when we can find that, everybody wins.
Eric Hammerling from the Connecticut Forest Park Association. Thanks for some time. Hopefully we'll see you again soon, my friend.
All right, I look forward to that.
You
Thanks,
got it.
Pete.
Thanks, Eric. On behalf of Eric Hammerling, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next time.